This is Mysterioso. Mysterioso is the podcast associated with Mysterioso Books. I am Terry Tapp, the host, and my guest for this episode is Antero Alli. He is a book author, filmmaker, and theater director, and he's got a new film coming out this week, premiering in theaters on Tuesday and Wednesday on YouTube. The film is called Tracer. Antero, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. As we talked about for a second, so I'm very glad to see you're producing and functioning as an artist through all this chaos. A lot of us shut down or stumbled or something like that, and it's beautiful to see, that your creativity and productivity. I don't like that word associated with art, but you know what I'm saying, that it hasn't been affected drastically.
Well, the thing is that the chaos actually fuels my creativity. And so it's actually, I would say in the last 3 years, I've written 2 books, both published now, and completed 3 feature movies. And I've never done that in such a short period of time. I mean, that's a lot of output right there. And I think a lot of it came from, just the times that we're in, the uncertainty, the chaos, especially, because I look at uncertainty as a creative state. I'm friends with unknowns. I don't have a problem with being clueless or not knowing what's happening. I kind of side with it. And I get nervous when I get too sure of things.
I understand that. In fact, that really resonates with me. I tell people often when I'm giving a talk or reading that I'm an idiot, and I laugh about it because the more, this is cliche, but the more I learn, the more I realize how little I know, and at the same time embracing the unknown. The uncertainty really, I think, makes life richer immediately.
Yeah, I can relate. I don't know if you know about this ritual that Gurdjieff, the spiritual teacher, the early 20th century. So he had this ritual called toasting the idiots.
I think I remember this from Robert.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Bob Wilson in his books brings it up as well. And it's basically, all of his followers, who would come to, work with him or whatever, they would be sitting at the dinner table with him, and he'd basically drink them all under the table.
Right.
Toasting a different idiot with each drink. So he came to a kind of a rainbow spectrum of all these different, you pick and choose. You can be a number of different kinds of idiot. You can be an emotional idiot. You can be a physical idiot. You can be a psychic idiot. You can be a spiritual idiot. You can be a dumbass idiot.
Yeah.
So pick and choose. We're all idiots.
Do you notice, we'll get to your films, but you've got such a rich knowledge and background and perspective. It's hard not to explore many different things. But what's your experience with uncertainty and idiocy today? Because to me, the path of the idiot is very sacred. And I embrace it, as I was trying to say, as a joke. But the joke itself is very serious. As a elementary school kid, there was a year in which I was labeled as cognitively challenged, we say now, but mentally retarded is what it was, and I carried that with me, that thought that I'm incapable, not incapable. That's not correct. That I struggle to understand something. That I'm very I'm a small creature, and I'm humbled by, an amazing expanding universe. And now I don't see that attitude around. Like, we seem to be moving more and more in a culture of certainty and fools. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've seen it too. And it sort of makes sense that during this, era of it really truly escalating uncertainty, with the economy and politics and, the COVID, there's just a lot of exposure to more uncertainty than I think a lot of people are accustomed to. And so, there's a swing towards wanting to find some place where they can be like have this one sure thing, or they may clamp down on their beliefs so hard that it becomes a dogma, partly to find some kind of security, no matter how false, so that they can endure the era. And the thing is that there's anxiety and uncertainty. They're two different things. The state of uncertainty is an objective truth. That's life. Life expresses itself through uncertainty. It's a vital point. Anxiety is a very personal reaction to how much uncertainty you can bear before you start acting like a nervous monkey. So there's a lot of anxious people because they haven't learned how to permit more uncertainty. And it's kind of not their fault that there's a default culture at large that has been a kind of a dumbed down direction for many years now. And it has really inhibited, the human capacity for creative thought and critical thinking. And so there's a lot more passive absorption of information, regardless of whether it's true or not. People are just taking it all in. And the more they take in, the more crazy they feel, or the more uncertainty and then more anxiety. So it's really crazy making time unless you're have figured out how to think for yourself and are still capable of a creative thought and still have somewhat of a supple imagination, so that you can begin creating your own images and creating your own stories and your own interpretations of what's happening, so you're not so vulnerable to the mainstream news and so forth.
You bring this up really reminds me of a thought I had years ago that I guess I still hold in a ghostly form, as a kind of reverberating through a lot of more conscious thoughts, and it has to do with your writing, Robert Anton Wilson's, about Chapel Perilous and uncertainty, and Alan Watts talks about this. I wondered years ago, I was reading a lot about complexity theory, and I would dive into programs in schools, like graduate schools, sometimes under false credentials, most of the time under false credentials, just in an obsessive quest to find an answer to some question that was bothering me, or burning, or delighting. And I ended up studying a lot of neuroscience, and I got fascinated by the work of Stuart Kaufman. So I did some reading in cytology and then population genetics, so I could understand some of what he was trying to convey. I got to sit with him and speak with him about some of this, and I had this moment of perceiving amazing complexity that really was almost a spiritual movement. The negative part of that is I thought it would be so hard to convey this to the so-called average person, and that the average person, so to speak, was moving further away from knowledge by not pursuing some of what was being investigated in science and in art and in philosophy during that time in the 90s. And now it almost seems like the stupidity and foolish certainty that's pervading the culture is a response to that. I'm sorry I'll give the floor back to you, but it almost reminds me of the observation that fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, is a modern phenomenon, not an ancient or a medieval or traditional phenomenon, but it is in a way a response to things like the light bulb. If like God can't be explained or easily embraced if you have light bulbs. and we don't really realize this craziness. But if you begin to understand the amazing complexity of human thought right now, it's easy to back away into clownish, ideas of demons and QAnon and things like this.
Yeah, yeah. Um, you know, um, one of the downsides of getting closer to the complexity you talk about, um, studying various sciences or occult practices to gain knowledge. One of the downsides of becoming so fucking informed about all these dimensions and levels is that if you cannot find a way to live with it,
right?
If you cannot find a way to live with that knowledge is just going to eat you up. And so this is, for myself, my mental health is I care about it. I care about my mental health. So I'm not pursuing any knowledge anymore. I'll do a little research for my films here and there, but I'm not looking to answer some unquestionable question, and to answer some absolute question, that kind of thing. I'm just not looking for the meaning of life anymore. And that started when I figured out that life doesn't necessarily have meaning. And if I want meaning, I could just fucking create it. And so this is part of my creative process in my filmmaking. This is what sustains a sense of meaning in my life, not because I found some great cosmic answer to, the big questions. It's more like I'm making it up as I go along, and I'm just getting better at it as I go along. And so the borders between waking life and dream, the borders between unknowns and knowledge get more and more blurry. They start blending together more. And it's a life, it's a way of living for me. I don't recommend it to anyone else. I don't give workshops on this kind of thing or teach that. I do, offer courses online, but they're, more specific to topics that I've written about in a couple of my books.
Right. Well, let's dive into this film, and we can loop around to these other topics, because I find this fascinating. I feel like as artists, which is how I define myself above everything else, we actually are encountering things together. And when I back away from things and I hear people speak, I feel like they're wrestling with the very things I'm wrestling with. I've heard a number of people talk about creating meaning lately, and I know this is a theme that throughout the 20th century was discussed because of the lack of religious faith, or the collapse after World War I of a lot of faith in institutions. And now I really find people and myself looking for some place to live, a home, and finding it in their work as artists, and not in any spatial geographical locale. And I feel that uncertainty is pushing us there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The sense of home, a sense of belonging. I find that within myself in a wellspring of silence. So I'm very much at home in silence. Oftentimes, if I'm socially around people, I don't feel compelled to chat or talk unless someone asks me a question or feel moved to speak. I just don't. I'm a kind of a quiet guy. And it's not because I'm scared of people or I'm a kind of a social idiot, which I can be sometimes, but more like I'm literally at home in silence. It becomes the baseline of my existence, and out of that silence is born what I will call the bottom line of my existence, which I call gratitude.
Mm. Yes.
Yeah. So Yeah, I don't live in any way where I have this idea that the world owes me anything. The world owes me nothing. I live as if my life was given to me as a gift. My life is a gift. And with that gift, I work with it, I play with it, and then I offer it back to the community, to the world through various venues, books, films, classes, whatever, so that I'm in a constant place of feeling that I'm receiving a gift, but it doesn't end there. I have to continue giving of the gift. So it's a full circle for me.
Yeah. And I see that in your work. Specifically, this new film, Tracer. Can you talk about that a little? Like, I saw that you pulled the plot description off of YouTube and put it back.
Well, I put another one back.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah, it's a suspense film, and it's the first suspense film I've ever made, and I'm just learning as I go. And part of preserving the suspense is not to say too much, not accidentally create a spoiler or spell things out too much. You ruin the party basically.
Right.
So what I can say about Tracer is that I can tell you what inspired me to make it, and out of that inspiration came the characters and the story and the plot and all the kind of weird visionary drug experiences. So anyway, it started from a kind of genuine concern for the epic surveillance culture, not just in the USA, but all across the world. The surveillance culture has really peaking out. It's at a real high level point, very sophisticated. And I was kind of concerned about that. So I wanted to go back to what I would call the very earliest expression of the surveillance culture. And I came to Russia in the 1950s, where they were training clairvoyants and psychics in the technique of remote viewing, so that they would go into a trance and they would get images and impressions from something happening many miles away, and then they would have to go check it. They have to go, find the evidence. Are they actually seeing something that actually happened at that point in time and space? And they just got very good at it because they put a lot of money into it. It was for their spy business, basically.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, wow, that is, I wonder how many people even know about that, remote viewing. So I decided, in my imagination, that the Russian mafia got a hold of this technology and started training their own mafioso assassins in this remote viewing skill. So they would use those skills to find their targets, people that, violated the mafia in some way or insulted them or offended them, so that, through remote viewing, they could maybe find them. I added the other element of a designer drug called C9, which stands for Circuit 9, which enhanced the remote viewing capacity to allow these assassins to enter the dreams of the individuals they were tracking.
Mm.
And now it goes to a whole nother level, because now we're really talking about entering into the psyches of the people from far away and getting information from their dreams, and then seeing where they wake up in their beds, and then looking at the landmarks around them to get a sense of where they might be physically in time and space. And so this started, the process going. I thought that was a really intriguing idea based on something that's actually happening, but then spun with my imagination with the designer drug. and these these clairvoyant monsters entering the dreams of their targets. Yeah. So, and then what I wanted to do was I wanted to explore a family drama, not necessarily a subplot, but something that was happening simultaneously as this clairvoyant monster was tracking someone that's basically stole their money. That was the story. They stole about $1 million or something like that. And this is an old guy, he's an old sailor. He basically escaped from the mafia, unseen, unknown. He's purchased an expensive yacht, and he's basically sailing up and down the west coast of the United States, and just basically untrackable, or so he thinks.
Right.
And then his son, who's been traveling the world for about 7 years, has an identity crisis. He doesn't know who he is anymore. He's kind of like almost changing his name with every country he goes in, and he's just losing track of who he is. And he figures it's a good time to return to the family and to find out maybe there I can kind of restore my sense of identity. Fair enough. So he goes back, and first place he checks is his ex-girlfriend, thinking, oh, maybe he can strike up another chance. Maybe he has another chance with her. And he goes back, and she has changed in a really big way. She has developed certain psychic abilities of her own and is now self-employed on her vlog, her YouTube vlog, as an oracle. And so she does these brief oracular blasts to her followers, and they pay her for it. And she goes through some rather intense trances, and so after the blast, she has to make some kind of change, or she has to do something to help get her out of the trance, because it kind of spins her head. So anyway, he comes back, he meets up with her. He doesn't know what's going on. What is this trance? What are you doing? And they're not going to hit it off. Okay, so he leaves, and he's now going to his dad. Well, I don't want to ruin the story for people who want to go watch the movie. But anyway, he goes to his dad, and after that, he comes back to his girlfriend, and then he goes to visit his mom, who he hasn't seen in like 20 years because she abandoned him when he was 11, and put herself into a psych ward. Severe depression, possible schizophrenia. And so she was in the psych ward for a few years, and then they let her out, and then she decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore. She just wanted to be her own person. And anyway, so there's a lot of elements in this, and all along this time, the clairvoyant mobster is getting closer and closer to his target, and then things just kind of go, well, they go south, and they go north, and they go east, and they go west all at the same time.
That's fascinating. Do you know the Wim Wenders film that's called, what is that? Till the End of Time, or so? It's about the end of dreaming, and I think it's like a 4-hour film.
Wow.
I think it came out in 91. I'm almost positive it's Wim Wenders. I started to watch it some years ago and didn't return to it. But it's something like a commodification and harvesting of dreams that it doesn't sound like exactly like what you're doing, but it plays with this idea of people invading dreams or getting a hold of dreams in some way.
Oh, I think isn't that called Until the End of the World?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah, I've seen it several times. It's a very interesting film. First time I saw it, I was so blown away. I had to see it right away the second time, and I was still blown away. Then I saw it about 30 years later, and I was completely unimpressed. I don't know why, but you know how sometimes your perception over time will change, and what you really found kind of terrific in one era of your existence, you come back to it and you go, not so much.
Yeah, I've had that with several books that seem profound, reading them at 15 or 17, and then at 34 or 44, I've read them and really thought they were fairly thin. So
Yeah.
I didn't finish that film until the end of the world. I need to go back because a friend of mine adores it and really
Yeah.
speaks highly of it. And I honestly, I was really tired when I was watching it. I couldn't get into it, but the themes you're playing with are really remarkable because I wonder about this, our surveillance culture and where we're headed with this. And also, our dreams and our unconscious life even has been colonized already so much by advertising and by I hate to say subliminals in the sense, the phony conspiratorial thinking, but in the real conspiratorial thinking, we have people that have crafted ways to homogenize our emotional lives through news, even through propaganda and commercials.
Well, yeah, the evil geniuses of the advertising companies for sure. The thing is, too, if you're just passively absorbing what's coming out of the TV or the computer, there's a far more likelihood that those images are going to do a couple things. They're going to corrode your imagination, and so you're going to be incapable of creating an image that you can call your own. And right. They will most likely appear in your dreams as icons and archetypes. And in the dreams, they become a lot thinner, not so personal to you anymore. It's almost like, you watch TV at night and you go, to bed at night after TV and you dream watching TV.
I've done this where this is very disturbing to me. I've fallen asleep with a TV on. I don't have a TV now, but years ago, and like 15 years ago, and lately I'll fall asleep with a podcast on or a book on tape or something, and my dreams, as you said, they become thinner. Like the crazy complexity and inexplicable elements are not there, and it disturbs me enough where it wakes me up. Do you have this? Like,
I don't personally. I've been aware of media influence and imagination lobotomy for a good 35 or 40 years now. So I've decided to begin changing my thinking habits and my outlook in such a way over the years to become a little bit more, maybe actually a lot more immune to that culture. So it pretty much just rolls off, like water off a duck's back with me. So I don't take that much of it in. I'm very protective of my imagination. I nurture it daily. Stimulate it daily to kind of keep it alive. It becomes its own kind of animal. It becomes its own kind of entity in me. And it's a kind of a redeeming influence more and more as I live in this culture where, imagination loss, even imagination death has become this kind of epidemic condition. It's to me, it's the real epidemic. It's the real tragedy of this culture, is the loss of the imagination. And the reason I say that is because I'm a firm believer that imagination death precedes death of soul. The soul resides in the imagination. The soul and imagination are part of the same fabric. And once the imagination dies, the soul follows suit.
I, I feel the truth of that, and not to insert this too much, but I'm working on a larger philosophical work about existentialism and an updating, as ridiculous as that sounds, and it takes off of James Hillman's work in part, among other things, and he talks about that. The soul, you create a soul through spending time with art, through traveling. Your experiences and the depth of experiences actually create the our meaning to such an extent that they can be called um, soul generation. He doesn't call it that, but basically we've lost that to such a great extent. I wonder if there's a direct line, like you're talking about, between our death collectively, our death individually, and this individual and collective death of our ability to imagine.
Well, I think it's a number of influences occurring at the same time. It probably begins in public schools, where the students are all graded, get their high grades for what they know, and they get the fail mark for not knowing. And so the whole taboo of not knowing is introduced fairly early on. And the exaltation of knowledge and what you know, well, you can memorize all this information and get an A on a test, and aren't you special?
Right.
So there's the knowing mind and the unknowing mind. And ideally, they work together. It's not like you're trying to cancel out one or the other unless you've, been really confused about the workings of your own mind. They both have their purposes. And I think I may have talked about this before on your show, so I'll make it brief. The way it works out to me is through two types of attention, two ways we can pay attention. What I call the first attention and the second attention. So the first attention I'm talking about is an awareness that's linked to thinking and the automatic assignment of meaning and labels. And the first attention is pretty much what I'll call the default attention of society, meaning that they cannot stop from assigning meaning and labels to what they perceive. It's this constant projection of labels and meaning onto things they perceive. First attention. The second attention, I believe everyone to some extent is capable of it. It represents that awareness linked to presence, to energy, and to a relaxation of the assignment of labels and meaning. So, the meditation is if you do an experiment, can you just stand in front of a piece of art, like on the wall, and with second attention, you're not calling it art. You're not calling it anything. You're simply seeing it. Okay, then you shift over to the first attention, and now you can call it art. Now you can start criticizing it. Now you can label it this. It's this era of art, or this is what the artist did, and so forth. But if you can shift back to the second attention, all that disappears, and you're just seeing what's before you. There's no interpretation. It's fresh.
Right.
It's beyond description. This might be akin to intellect and intuition, possibly. There's obviously, parallels there. But like I mentioned before, these two ways of seeing, first attention and second attention, ideally, they learn to work together. So you don't get trapped in first attention, which is basically getting trapped in time and space, and there's a sense of entrapment that naturally comes along with not being able to escape the known.
Which I would take, given what you're saying, to also mean being trapped by cultural norms and what is presented to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it's cultural norms or your own thinking process, anytime you're labeling something, you're in first attention. Anytime you're interpreting something or put a meaning on it, you're in first attention. Anytime that you're looking at something and you're thinking of shit over and over again, you're in first attention. Um, and second attention is a complete escape from that, and it moves you into a more of a kind of Gnostic experience, gnosis, direct experience, direct seeing, direct perception. And the thing is that um, first attention is very, very comfortable. You can stay in there a long time. Second attention is not that comfortable. There's only so much of that direct perception that you can bear without trying to find some way back to the first attention. Individuals that get stuck in the second attention are courting schizophrenia.
Yes, yes.
Right. So this is why it's important to find relationships between the two, so that the way that you think, the way that you label things, the meaning you give things, can honor, can somehow respect the experience of the second attention, so that you get better at speaking the truth about something. So it moves you out of just having an opinion. Now you can say what you see.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very different things.
It's a very elegant way of putting this. I feel like without cultivating what you're calling second attention, which ties in, of course, with imagination, but it links us to these chains of culture that present no alternatives. We're right now we're bound to a suicidal future, and it's for most people they can't picture any alternative future. I was at a book fair, anarchist book fair here in New York City last weekend, the one before. I lose track of time, but I purchased this book called Everything for Everyone, and it is a history of the New York Commune that takes place from 2052 to 2072. It's a brilliant book, interviews with people who will be involved in that, and what happened or happens or will happen in this future history. And I think this is brilliant, along with other works coming out in that genre that actually allow us to imagine past an impasse of the present that comes about through, what you're alluding to or what you're directly referencing, this death of the imagination or murder of the imagination.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about, it sounds to me like the future. And there's something that I've come to discover, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, so it's a kind of personal experience. And it's through the working of the second and first attentions, getting them more compatible with each other. And what this has somehow opened up in me is this notion of a future self. And this is not the same as, getting ahead of myself and thinking of the future or anything like that. This is more on a level of identity. The future self is basically that part of me that has already happened, that has already reached its realization, and it's sort of waiting for the rest of me to catch up. And so I've just been tracking my future self, basically. I'm on my way there. I'm on the track. I know where I'm going. But it's not anything I could explain or justify or give proof of or anything like that, which I don't care. I don't really care about that. It has brought about a sense of personal destiny, if I can, sound a little bit, pompous or presumptuous there. But
Sure.
it really has. It's made my own kind of trajectory very clear. I know where I'm going, and it's not because of an idea in my head, but it's because I'm following the call of my future self. It's like following a call.
Yes.
And I just get, I'm just going to get better at it because I'm listening. I'm receptive. And this has been, absolute key to enhancing my creative process. To me, creativity starts with receptivity. It doesn't start as an act of will. It used to. When I was younger, I was creating more out as an act of will, and I became very ego identified. I'm the artist. Look at me. And as I've gotten older, I've been trying to make the artist disappear and just let the art, have a life.
Yeah, that really, as you said, not to be too personal, but why not in this? I feel like through the pandemic, my understanding as an artist has evolved radically in a way along the lines of what you're saying. I've tried to do many things and come from a background which has no artist, like it's hillbilly, um, and uh, and now my ability to see what I'm doing has increased. I attribute it to my death. I may have died during the pandemic, and I have evidence for this. But I've gone with this idea that I died because there's direct evidence, and my understanding and my perception of writing and painting and drawing has increased in dimensionality. This is probably the clearest unclear way I could say it. But it seems to be a state above or a transcendent intermixing of first and second attention in a way that posits a future self, like what you're saying. I heard Jodorowsky, well, not heard, I was watching The Dance of Reality, I believe it was. It was one of his recent films. And he was talking about, these things that are happening to you are the ways you will get to me. And I'm hearing like I said before, like what artists do tends to echo, and what you're saying echoes with some of my experiences in the past year and with others. And let me throw something your way, and hopefully all this is talking about your film because you have such a rich inner life and rich creative life. It's like diving into a fractal pool here. So I hope you don't think I'm just wasting your time on these things.
No, go ahead.
But one thing I wonder about, and it's part of a mix of philosophical and neuroscientific research, because I've with false credentials gone into the latter at times and published in it. So I'm not totally a fool, or more of a fool maybe in this. But if you look at the lives of artists before the 20th century, what they saw and what entered into their consciousness would be what they perceived. So they see trees, they see roads, they see houses, they see people, animals. I mean, just what you would see walking down, through the countryside or through a city. Once you get to the 20th century, you begin to have this imagistic level that comes to being through screens, through projections, through movies and televisions and computers and so forth. And that level of being it functions in a certain way. I mean, we know, if you study psychoanalysis, you have primary process. So you mistake, or maybe it's not a mistake, but you take what is seen, what is perceived to be quote unquote real in a certain way. And advertising has functioned in this sense by telling people so and so slept with so and so in a tabloid, for instance, or so and so killed JFK or whatever. And when your brain sees that, at a certain level, you accept it as true, regardless of what consciously you may think. And this is a vital point with a form of conditioning. So I wonder now, we're living in this world of all these images. I wonder what that is doing to us on a foundational level unconsciously. Well, one last bit on that, and I'll turn it to you because that was the point of this. I did this series of drawings years ago, which is playing into some writing now. And in these drawings, I added wounds from soldiers in World War I to images of Dick Cheney, to images of Henry Kissinger and things. And people didn't notice that their faces were deformed by these wounds. They would notice you, they would notice me. I was intrigued by this. And a preacher, country preacher, asked me, he noticed it. And I said, other people don't notice this. And he said, I think I understand why you would not see George Bush or Henry Kissinger or Dick Cheney with a facial wound. It's because they're shapeshifters. And I couldn't quit laughing at that because he's right. I said, they function on a level of images that isn't human. And I'll just give you that. I think there's something going on with dreams and the unconscious that is controlling us, and it's not doing it in a like I said, a QAnon kind of science sci-fi, very silly way. There's a deep change that's happening because of these images and this other level of living that you and I don't really function on. I think this is just this is me throwing out something wild to play with.
Yeah, no, I follow you there. I haven't worked a 9-to-5 job in my life. I'll be 70 in a couple months. And one of the effects of that has had on me psychologically, it has placed me clearly outside of the timeline of individuals who are on a 9-to-5 punch clock. Experience of time is money. And I learned or discovered very early on, really as a teenager, that time was not money, but time was the currency of the time of my life. So early on, I was just brainstorming, how was I going to get by? How was I going to live in this world and own my time? Right. And that became really like my main ambition, actually. And in the meantime, I was writing and directing experimental theater in Berkeley. This was during the 70s when it was actually, it didn't really cost much to rent. The rent was really low during that time in that area. So I was able to get by throughout the 70s pretty easily in a way, because just the economy was that way. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a minority of people that can still think for themselves, that are capable of creative thought, that still have enough imagination to come up with their own images and their own visions and, their own kind of idea of what makes their life worth living. And then there's a whole mass of people that for some reason have become casualties of the era. And there is nothing anyone can do about that. One exception might be, if there is an asteroid coming close to Earth and it looks like, yeah, it's going to hit us. So that may be enough to shock collective consciousness to such a heightened level that may actually start opening up, the higher centers, that happen, in any kind of near-death experience, because the body just wants to survive, and if it's under threat, the senses are going to pop open. They're going to go wide open. They're not going to shut down. They're going to go wide open because survival. Yeah. So, in terms of, the 90%, 85, whatever percent of the individuals that are still struggling in their sleep, or hypnosis, or struggling with survival, and they haven't figured out survival yet, and they're anxious. And so, I have empathy for that. I don't mock it or think I'm above that or anything like that. But part of what keeps individuals in that predicament caged, what keeps them imprisoned, is many things. One of them, of course, is the onslaught of images that they didn't create that is now corrupting their imagination, where they lose confidence in their own ability to have a vision they can live for, that sort of thing.
Yes,
but there's this subculture of what I'll call consumerism. Well, everybody knows what consumerism is, but that consumerism was a very significant influence to all of this, because it has very successfully replaced the human sense of immediacy, which is the sense of knowing that one is actually alive, with immediate gratification. So a lot of people have bought into immediate gratification as a false sense of being alive, but it doesn't last long. It's immediate, and then it's gone, and they have to buy something else, or they have to buy something bigger or better or whatever. It just goes on and on and on. There's no satisfaction. It's a frustration path. So how to restore the capacity for having an actual experience, how to know the difference between simulation and genuine stimulation. The world of difference there. And this is why, if you're kind of lost in the sauce of it, the simulation becomes the surrogate stimulation. It's not the real thing. It's a little bit like, you can put yourself into any kind of state you want if you just stimulate your thinking process. If you start worrying a lot about a particular something, that worry will arouse your anxiety much more than the thing that you're worrying about.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, people are experts at self-punishment, and I think part of religions have something to do with that, I'm sure. But yeah, these are some of the notes that have come to me, and just observing the same things you've been observing.
Well, I'm bouncing off that. I wonder, like we're toying with like self-extincting. It's a strange word, but we're creating our own extinction, and we have these grand worries right now, environmental worries, and right behind them are social and economic worries. But it makes me wonder. We've eliminated so many immediate threats in our environment while creating these gigantic, overarching shadows. I see people online posting nonsense that to me looks like substitute fears. Like, for instance, I saw several people posting about a trans doll, and actually someone I knew posted about this, not a friend, but there's a doll that it's a little girl, and if you lift its dress, you will see an extra piece of plastic, which they're taking to be a penis.
Oh, no.
Yes, like why would an adult? This is the point. But so they wanted to protest or sign online petitions about this doll. I looked this up. The doll is from Sweden. The company said that there's a manufacturing defect, and there's just an extra piece of residue from the molding process that you're seeing. But and if you played with model kits even or done any casting, there are these artifacts of the process. So this is a very real thing that anyone who works with their hands would know that you have these or creates things. But to have adults looking at a doll, a child's doll, inspecting the doll's non-existent genitalia and deciding that the non-existent genitalia are a threat to America, a threat to their children, tells me that this animal, that is us, it doesn't understand fear, especially like, our soil quality globally is rapidly deteriorating. And without soil, we're not going to live without healthy soil. So there's a very real fear. But we've got, 50, 60 harvests left before the soil deteriorates to an unusable level without attention being applied to that. So, the thread is backed away in time, and you have this ridiculous symbolic threat of a penis on a doll that is going to destroy life as you know it. It seems like what you're saying. People they've gotten far away from understanding their own experience and trusting that. Like no serious adult would worry about a penis, even if it was existing on a doll. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, the whole thing's kind of hilarious and kind of shocking at the same time. You mentioned extinction, and one of the things that I've found curiously absent in the discussions around climate change and the various extreme weather that we're experiencing and so forth. There seems to be almost a unanimous agreement that it's all caused by people, by cars, by factories. And I'm pretty sure some of it is, but I don't really buy into the notion that it all is, the cause of that. I've come to understand this planet as a kind of entity. It's not just this dead rock spinning through space. To me, it's an entity that has incarnated as a planet. It's this really huge, massive entity. And it's been my experience that this entity is calling the shots for the most part. This entity has been thinning the herd of multiple species for millions of years, and it's gone through many different extinction cycles. It's just part of what it does. It's part of its process. The planet has its own kind of organic agenda, its own transformational process, so to speak. And so I'm thinking, I think the human race will become extinct. I don't see how it cannot. But I don't think it's all from our doing. I think that's hubris. I think that there's a little bit too much self-importance, thinking that, oh, we did it all. We fucked it up. Now we're going to pay for it. Partly, yes. But the planet is ahead of us, meaning it knows more than us about the planet. The planet knows more about the planet than people know about the planet. And, nature bats last. It's going to have the final say. The earth is calling the shot. It's always called the shots way before humans showed up. I just wanted to say that, kind of, insert that in as maybe as one of my final moments here in this conversation.
No, there is this, James Lovelock's work.
Yeah.
The biologist. I think he's still alive, actually, or he just died recently. I lived to be 104 or something.
Yeah, he was ahead of his time for sure.
Yeah, I read his book on the Gaia hypothesis.
Yeah.
Many years ago, and I agree with what you're saying. I mean, my take on that would be that if at least some significant part is caused by us, then we should be addressing that. And we're definitely not addressing it. We're actually making it much worse. Fossil fuel companies and places like that, and entities like that are. But I do think we have to come to some understanding that, we're one small piece in a bigger puzzle.
Yeah.
And at least to see the planet whether, whatever degree metaphorically or straightforwardly you want to, as an entity, which is what, this, what Lovelock was talking about, and have some harmonious relationship with it.
See, my harmonious relationship with what's going on in the environment is my take on climate change. It's unstoppable. And it's gone too large. It's gone too far. This is the Earth calling the shots. It's moving it forward. It didn't start out as big, but it built up momentum. And I don't think that building up of momentum was entirely people informed. I think the planet's on board and is accelerating what we call climate change as an unstoppable, inevitable force. Where it ends, who can say?
Right.
But I don't think we have any power to change it, or for sure not to stop it.
And well, let me address something just as a side note too. You said that your last comment in this conversation, you shouldn't. This is one thing it's one of my I would say pet peeves, but it's more of a rage at this moment. With very few exceptions, I'll entertain any argument. And I was introduced to someone in the past 2 months who is a very helpful person, has been in my life, but she's an anti-vaxxer. And she was introduced to me with that caveat, like you'll have to talk to her as an anti-vaxxer. She's actually a very reasonable person and has arguments about that. And I disagree with her arguments, but I listen to any reasonable argument, unless it's for something like, excuse me, racism or homophobia, something misogyny, something that I think is so patently obvious that it's pointless. And I did, as a teenager, I read a lot of fascist literature and a lot of things that open those topics up too. It's just that I see them far in the rearview mirror. So don't fear presenting anything, because I really, I hate this tendency we have culturally to stop people if we disagree with them about something. Like, there's no way to learn and progress by doing that. I'm not talking about bigots, hateful people that want to attack others. But in terms of actual scientific debate or more sophisticated social debate, there shouldn't be this fear that, like, someone says the wrong thing or uses the wrong word and they're cast out of heaven because of that.
Yeah, I get it. So I have a question. There's the YouTube link to Tracer where people can start watching it. Wednesday from 7 p.m. it starts. It's activated at 7 p.m. Pacific time. It'll continue playing. It's not going to just. I'm not going to just take it out once the premiere is on. But I'm thinking maybe you have that link, and if you don't, I'll probably send that to you.
I'll put that link in. And what's the name of your channel? I'll put a link to it. But
you mean my YouTube channel?
Yes.
Okay, let me just check. I'm just going to open it up. I'm so bad with remembering labels.
Well, I wrote it down in my studio, so I'll put a link to that. And I wanted to ask you.
My YouTube channel is called Vertical Pool. And if anyone wants to know, what I'm up to, what I'm teaching, my books, my films, all of that, they go to verticalpool.com, and they're going to find out more than they want to know.
I've got another question for you, and then we should talk again, because some of the things you brought up dovetail in, like they should be expanded, and they dovetail with your paratheoretical work. But not paratheoretical, paratheatrical work. Yeah, I was too many syllables there, but they dovetail in with your paratheatrical work. specifically the second type of attention. And I
Yeah.
think people need to know more about that. And we can discuss, what's happened with that during the pandemic and things. But that takes us further afield from this other question, which is Tuesday, your film Tracer actually is shown in theaters.
Like
Where?
one
Okay,
theater only, and that would be in Portland, Oregon, at the Clinton Street Theater.
Clinton. Okay.
Clinton Street Theater in Portland, Oregon, and that show is at 7:30 p.m. It's actually a benefit for the theater. I'm, transferring all the admissions that we get to the theater, which is undergoing a kind of a renovation and a new management. And they're like, the most indie supportive, indie friendly, to the filmmakers that I have ever been in. So they just deserve all the support and help they can get. They're doing something very rare, almost angelic. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. I've not been to Portland, but I've heard from others who live there of the gentrification and a lot of things being pushed out. And it's a common story, but it's a shame.
Yeah,
It's a community.
they hold a special signature of being the only theater in the United States that has consistently shown Rocky Horror every week. So there's no other theater that's played it longer than they have. And it's a party every week. People come dressed up as the characters, and everybody knows the lines, and it becomes this whole joyous thing. And I think it's kind of cute and kind of wonderful.
Yeah, I miss the days of. They still exist, some of them, but those art house theaters and what do we call them? I know I lived in Cincinnati for a while, and they had the Real Movies, among other places, where they would show almost everything, and all the
Yeah,
time, and it's their
that's
offering.
that's Clinton Street. Their programming is really across the board. They have I have never seen anything quite like this. The kind of variety and diversity of films and entertainment that passes through there. So it's really a terrific place.
Thank you so much for being on, Antero. This is Antero Alli. His film Tracer, which is a brand new film, is debuting online on YouTube on his channel Vertical Pool this Wednesday at 7:30. Is that seven? No, is it 7:30?
7 p.m. Pacific time.
7 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube on his channel Vertical Pool this coming week. It's also debuting at the Clinton Street Theater at 7:30 in Portland.
Yeah.
And so if you're in that area, you can see it personally. It sounds wonderful, and especially anything that tackles the surveillance culture and maybe what it's doing to us on some substrate foundational levels is remarkable. Antero, thank you so much for being a guest again, and as usual, I feel like we just barely scratched the surface. So maybe once the film is available and we're not just playing spoiler, we can talk more about that and return to some of these themes in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. We'll scratch some new surfaces.
Thank you so much for taking time and doing this, Antero. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Thank you.